back, and then in 2007, here I was mentoring this. One of your guests on the podcast is Johan Yagura
Oh,
from,
wow.
and
Yes.
and his wife Kiero is from Japan. So here I was in 2007, mentoring this young
Amazing.
lady. Her name is Masami,
Mm-hmm.
and you know what it's like when you're mentoring someone. As the mentor, you have the privilege of asking the questions, and the mentee is supposed to answer them, right? And
Sure.
so she comes into this room, and she looked. I don't want to say disheveled. That's because that's not true, but it was clear that she had, quote unquote, been somewhere in
Mhm.
her mind, if you will. And so she said in this lovely Japanese accent, she said, can we change our session then? I said, sure. And she said, what I'd like to do is ask you a question. And I said, sure, go for it. And she said, well, it's not so much a question. I want you to imagine something. And I said, go for it. And she said, well, I want you to imagine a different world. So I want you to imagine a world where every time business is done, something great happens, right, in our world. Now, at the time, I was what would be called an Aussie bloke, which means you kind of very outward in your expressions and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So she said that, and I said, "Oh yeah, that would be great," And she was smart enough to realize that I didn't really get it at all. so, so she said, I don't think you get it. And I said, well, help me. And she said, well, I've given it a name. It's called Buy One, Give One. And I said, okay, so how does that work? And she said, well, imagine you go to an electronics store. For those of you listening in the US, let's say to Best Buy or something like that, right? And you want to buy a plasma TV. And you buy the plasma TV. I said, whoa, hang on a second. What did you say this thing is called? And she said, well, in my mind, I've called it Buy One, Give One. So I said, well, Masami, if I go to a store and buy a plasma TV, they're not going to give me another one. That's like a crazy business model, right? And so she said, no. She said, you still don't understand. And I said, well, help me. She said, well, just think about it. Why do you go buy that plasma TV? You want to do that because you want better vision,
Mm-hmm.
like a bigger or brighter or something like that. So how would it be, she said, if when you did that, someone who could not see got the gift of sight? And I went, oh,
Mm.
oh. And she could see that happening. And then I happened to be surrounded by books at the time. And she said, or, when an author sells a book, or how would it be if every time that happened, a tree got planted? This is in 2007.
Wow.
And then, I had a cup of coffee alongside me. So she said, or, someone sells a cup of coffee and somebody like a kid in need gets access to life-saving water. And I said, Masami, can I be your mentor for the rest of your life? and
Wow.
that was and that was one of those game-changing moments. And it's so interesting. You don't know how to do it. And so, but it sounds great, right? So then you've got to spend, a whole lot of time and energy and resources trying to figure it out. And it took us 3 years to figure that out. And it's all about doing tiny things. And
Mm-hmm.
we may talk about that later, because I'm not meaning to talk about B1G1 at this point, but it's just such a crucial point, in terms
Sure.
of those moments that, so, just 4 weeks ago, we crossed a 250 million
Whoa.
giving impacts. Right? And so the message for those again, thank you so much for listening, is it's important to, someone once said to me, Paul, the most important 18 inches in life are the 18 inches between your head and your heart. Right? And it's not that easy to go there. But what's so interesting is when you do, you start to see everything in a totally different light. And you start to understand that very tiny actions can bring massive things. I mean, for example, those of you listening don't know this at this point, but Payman and I are actually talking on Zoom. Now, it turns out that I have a little automatic thing in B1G1, as do a lot of other people. That means every time we talk on Zoom, 11 kids get access to education just by you and I talking on Zoom.
Amazing.
So, yeah. So, and that was very obviously.
How can more people do that? Because I spend most day talking on Zoom. I would love to do that. How can I do that? You're getting me excited now. Yeah, we'll talk about it in a moment.
But how you do it later. No, that's good.
Okay.
And I seriously, no, but I see, think about this as well. I said to everyone joining us, I said, thank you so much for taking the choice. And the most interesting thing about that is that where we are now, someone once said to me, they said, Paul, where you are in life right now is simply a result of all of the choices you've made at those moments, those critical moments in your life. It's the amalgamation of all of those moments. And what's happened is that since that happened, it's the weirdest thing, right? Is it the hypothalamus? Something that or the reticular activation system, whatever it is in our bodies, or the universe just combines so that when you take that step, you just get to connect with other things and with other people, and you become, you just keep on that journey. And so a friend of mine says, our environment dictates our performance. And I think there's some real truth in that as well. And so again, getting back to lucky, I mean, how lucky can you be that in 2007, you have that conversation that just leads you to, amazing things.